viewers, I hope in the last lecture I talked about the phrases and you must have practiced certain exercises that were given. The link to the exercises was also shared on the portal. So in today's lecture I am going to talk about clauses, and you already know what the clauses are. And the first thing that you should know when we start talking about the clauses is that why should we study about the clauses? Ever since your childhood, ever since your school days, you have been talking about phrases, clauses, sentences, types of sentences, synthesis of sentences, rewriting of sentences. Now, why is that exercise essential and crucial? Because that brings effectiveness to your writing. So therefore, it is very important for you to know how the sentences are structured and what is the best way to go about it to bring efficacy in your writing. So when we talk about the clauses, we are very clear about one thing, that these are group of words which have a proper syntactic structure. They have a subject and a predicate of their own. At the very outset, you very well know that what are the two parts of the subject? These are the subject and the predicate. So this kind of sentence, though is a group of words, it can also stand on its own. So in addition to the fact that this is a syntactic structure and it can stand on its own, you also need to know whether these group of sentences are these completing sense or not. So many a times the group of words which are labeled as clauses might not be able to communicate complete sense to the reader. Therefore, the clauses are classified into the main or subordinate clause depending upon whether the clause is making proper sense or not. So, clauses are a group of words that are a part of a larger sentence. They have a subject and a predicate of their own. They might be able to make proper sense, or they might not be able to complete the sense. So, have a look on this sentence. Now, there are two sentences. Sentence number one, and I think I need not, focus more on it. You already can see that this is a clause. My father travels by train till the New Delhi railway station and then takes a bus to reach his office in Noida. The section of the sentence that you see in red color is the subject, and the rest that follows is the predicate. In sentence number 2, the sentence is, I met your cousin who has blue eyes. I met your cousin who has blue eyes. So, have a look on this. I met your cousin. Now, what is this? This is clause number 1. What kind of a clause is this? Is this making complete sense? I met your cousin. Yes, obviously it is making complete sense. Therefore, this kind of a clause is labeled as the main clause or the principal clause or the independent clause also. So there are three terms. What are these? The main clause, the principal clause, or the independent clause. These are the three terms that can interchangeably be used for this kind of a clause. Have a look now on the second part of the sentence. The second part says, who has blue eyes? Now, this is also a clause. But does this clause make complete sense in itself? No, It doesn't. Why? Because you don't have, when does a sentence make complete sense or a clause makes complete sense? When it will have a subject and a predicate, right? So therefore the first clause was making complete sense, but in the case of the second clause, who has blue eyes is the subject is missing. Therefore, this kind of a clause is labeled as a subordinate clause. It will always require the help of a main or a principal clause in order to make full sense, complete sense. So I hope this is clear to you. We move on to the next sentence, which is a single independent sentence and a single independent clause. The sentence says that the 11th edition is out of stock. Now the 11th edition is the subject, is out of stock is the predicate. So what is dominant in this sentence? You just find one single thing. And what is this? I told you earlier, we label it as main clause, independent clause, or the principal clause. Therefore, you can interchangeably, use this term main, independent and principal for the clause that has an independent existence of its own, has a subject and a predicate of its own, and also it can make complete sense. So most of the times when a few questions are asked in the examination, the simplest of all could be identify the type of clause in the sentence. And then if you have this theoretical understanding about the clauses, it will be very easy for you to identify whether it is a main clause or it is a subordinate clause. Now, this is what we have seen in sentence number 1 on the previous slide. You had a sentence where there were two clauses. In sentence number 2 also you had two clauses, and in sentence number 3 you had only one clause. So the first clause is complete in itself, therefore it is independent. It is main or independent because it is completing the sense on its own. Let's know more about the dependent or the subordinate clauses now. In sentence number 2, as I already told you, who had blue eyes, the second clause cannot stand by its own. Therefore, it is a dependent or subordinate clause. And remember one thing, the most important thing that you should know is whenever a subordinate clause is starting, whenever a subordinate clause starts, it is preceded by a conjunction. The conjunction was who. So, any sentence that has a subordinate clause, it will be preceded by the subordinating conjunction. Now, here you in this sentence number 2, this who is the subordinating conjunction, right? Similarly, you have now a set of 3 sentences which are saying the same thing, but now that same thing has been said in a different manner. And this is why you need to know why should you be able to synthesize a sentence, why should you be able to identify where the main clause is, where the subordinate clause is, again in order to emphasize certain thing about what is being said is going to determine the kind of sentence construction that you are doing. So the first sentence says, since Alok was the most qualified applicant, he was offered the job. The second says, Alok was offered the job since he was the most qualified applicant. Sentence number 3 says, Alok, and there's a comma there, who was the most qualified applicant, again followed by a comma, was offered the job. Now, in these three sentences, can you identify the conjunction? Yes, you identified it right. This is the conjunction. Here, there's a change. Here, the conjunction is who. So, you get to see how, things can be rewritten, recited, and rephrased using a different conjunction, and the sentence structure is now going to be different. Okay, let's just talk about this. Now, this part of the sentence, which is beginning with a conjunction since, is going to be the subordinate clause. Please note, at times students get confused and they usually, try to understand the two clauses, main clause and the subordinate clause, by their being in the first place and the second place, the first half or the latter half of the sentence. But the subordinate clause can also precede the main clause. So here you have the conjunction since and rest follows. He was offered the job is the main clause here. In the next sentence, Alok was offered the job, and then you have the conjunction since. He was the most qualified applicant is again, having existence or meaning because it is connected to the main clause. So here you have Alok was offered as the main clause, right? Alok, who was the most qualified applicant. Now here, this part which is preceded by a conjunction is the subordinate clause. And what is the main clause? The main clause is Alok was offered the job. Alok was offered the job is the main clause, and this is your subordinate clause. And why is this the subordinate clause? Because it cannot stand on its own. It requires the main clause in order to make sense. Now, depending upon the kind of function that the clauses perform in the sentence, they are classified as noun clauses, adverb clauses, and adjectival clauses. So, the name itself reveals that when it is a group of words which contains a subject and a predicate and is functioning as a noun, it will be a noun clause. Now, what will happen? In order to identify that, you have to question yourself. At times, in the schools, you were taught the way anything that answers the question who, or anything that answers the question what and which. So that was the very basic style, that the teachers in your school days used to teach you. But now at this level, we would like you to develop some better skills instead of, anything that answered the question what was and who, which, and where, in order to differentiate whether it was a noun clause or it was an adjective clause or it was an adverb clause. That was a very general way in which anyone could identify by questioning, posing a question whether this is to be followed, or is this a noun clause, adverb clause, or an adjective clause. But now here you will try to understand a noun clause by the kind of function that it is performing. It has to be of a noun. Then the subordinate clause here again is going to be preceded by a subordinating conjunction. I hope you have done enough of your exercises on subordinating and coordinating conjunctions. Your assignment also posed a question on the subordinating and coordinating conjunctions. Your model paper also gave you certain questions on that. I hope you are well rehearsed on it. So you should not have any difficulty in identifying the clauses. Now, Noun clause is also a nominal clause. And what does this word nominal mean? Nominal means that it is a group of words that is functioning as a noun. So your key to this is a group of words that functions as a noun is going to be a noun clause. Example, I bought a watch. Now, what is this word watch? This word watch is a noun. When you supply certain more words to it, you rewrote it as I bought what I needed the most, and that is the watch. Now, what I needed the most is the subordinate clause, and what is the conjunction? I bought is the main clause. So this is the main clause or the principal clause. I use PC or MC for that. And this is the subordinate SC subordinate clause. What I needed the most is the subordinate clause. Now when you have a look on this, you get this is the nominal function this clause group of words is performing, and hence it is a noun clause. Have a look on the second sentence. I am looking for a help. I am looking for someone who will clean my room daily. Now, instead of the word help, now help here is not being used as a verb. It is being used as a noun for a domestic help, a maid, assistance that you require. So it is referring to a person. Therefore, in the second sentence, you have already, this is distinguished by the color of the ink, white and black, black and white. The portion in the black is the subordinate clause, and this is the principal clause. So if you get a question like this, identify the principal clause in the sentence and the subordinate clause. Very easy. Principal clause making sense, can stand on its own. It has a subject and a predicate. And when you are talking about the subordinate clause, how are you identifying it? The easiest way to identify is that it is preceded by a conjunction. I hope you commit that to your memory and you remember that and never go wrong while identifying the clauses in a sentence. And another kind of question that can be raised is, you could be asked to replace the noun with a noun clause or the noun clause alternatively by a noun. So that's how you can do it. I hope you have understood this and you would be working on this. Now there are a few more sentences here. I'll take these up quickly. The principle that all men are equal can be questioned. Already, these things, the clauses with the conjunctions. Now this is the conjunction that is there. That all men, I'll just point it out. Okay. So this is that all men are equal. Again in the sentence, the news that the boss has decided to quit. Here again, this is used as something which is expanding more about the noun, and therefore this is also referred to as an appositive noun clause. So the appositive clause is going to bring more clarity, more sense to the sentence. It is completing the meaning. The news, which news? The news that the boss had decided to quit. Now that is the news, and that is how it is making complete sense, and therefore this clause is referred to as the noun clause. Again, have a look on these sentences. The news that you gave me was false. Again here, there is some kind of an antecedent that has to be understood between these two, the words and the phrases. The news, which news that you gave me was false. So this is a case of a relative noun clause. This is just going into the minute details, but you just need to know how you have to identify the noun clauses or the main clauses or the subordinate clauses. Next sentence, why he leaves early on Fridays is still a mystery. Now, this why he leaves on Fridays is the subordinate clause and it is the noun clause. It was very odd is the main clause, and that he lost his identity card is the subordinate clause. A few more sentences. No one knows where he lives. Now, usually, when I just referred how in your school days you were taught anything that answers the question where is going to be an adverb, but here it is a noun clause. And why? The reason is no one knows where he lives. When we are using where he lives, what are we expanding upon? We are expanding upon the residence. That is, what is that word? The word is residence, right? So, if you have to, no one knows his residence or address, right? So, those are the nouns that can be used in place of where he lives. Therefore, this part is a noun clause. We are all aware that he is considerate. Again, this is an expansion, a relation, a relative noun clause that he is. We all are aware that he is considerate. And what is the conjunction here? The conjunction here, subordinating conjunctions. I don't understand how it all happened. How? So this word is preceding the subordinate clause, and this is the main clause or the principal clause. I hope you will be able to tackle any kind of questions that are raised for clauses or the noun clauses. Thank you.